It's a loss that touches the very core of his life. One show that has done this since 2009 is Pawn Stars on the History Channel. It perfectly combines entertainment, history, and negotiation. Rick Harisson, co-founder of the show and The Shop, has spent most of his life in the shop and worked hard to grow and expand the pawn shop business. Despite his clear dedication to growth, Rick has faced many personal hardships and legal battles that most people are unaware of. Let's examine what happened to Rick Harisson and get an update on his current condition. Richard Kevin Harisson, famously known to fans as Rick Harisson, was born on March 22, 1965, to Richard Benjamin Harisson and Joan Rue Harisson. His parents, had 4 kids, Sherry, Joseph, Rick, and Chris, with Rick being the third child. Rick experienced tragedy early in life when he lost one of his siblings, Sherry Joanne Harisson. She, the first child of Benjamin and Joanne Harisson, was born with Down syndrome and eventually passed away at the age of 6. Rick's father was a U.S. Navy veteran, and in 1967, when Rick was just 2 years old, his family moved to San Diego, California. Due to his father's military transfer, Rick faced ongoing problems as a child when he began having epileptic seizures at the age of 8. These seizures were serious and unpredictable, and they left him with no other choice but to spend a lot of time in bed. Isolated from his peers and unable to participate in many typical childhood activities, Rick found solace in reading books. This solitude sparked his lifelong love for books and reading. He especially liked a series by John D. Fitzgerald called The Great Brain, which featured a 10-year-old Utah con artist named Tom D. Fitzgerald, who inspired young Harisson. This mischievous yet brilliant character fascinated Rick, planting the seeds of his own clever, business-minded personality. Rick developed a passion for physics and history, finding himself particularly interested in the Royal Navy from the late 1700s to the early 1800s. His interest in these subjects would later serve him well in his career. Harisson attended Taft Middle School in San Diego, but eventually dropped out during 10th grade. Rather than follow a conventional academic path, he began selling fake Gucci bags for $20 a week, developing his street-smart approach to business. Early on, in April 1981, Rick and his family moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, after their parents' real estate business failed. At the age of 17, Rick faced another major life challenge. His girlfriend, Kim, became pregnant. Although he was very young, Rick made the brave decision to embrace fatherhood. Sadly, the couple experienced the terrible loss of their first child to a miscarriage. Despite this tragedy, they remained strong and eventually got married in 1982. They welcomed their first child, Corey, on April 27, 1983. Corey would later become vital to Rick's business and legacy. 2 years later, they welcomed their second son, Adam. Not long after Adam was born, Rick and Kim separated in 1985. The pressures of young parenthood and personal differences had taken their toll, but Rick didn't stay a single dad for long. Just 9 months after his divorce, he began dating Tracy. The two dated for about 8 months before getting married in 1986. Together, they took on the responsibility of raising Corey and Adam. During this time, Rick continued to grow both personally and professionally, never losing sight of his deep interest in history and antiques. We've already talked about Rick's early interest in physics and history, and it's worth mentioning again because it became incredibly valuable. In his career, when his father opened a small 300-square-foot second-hand gold and silver coin shop on Las Vegas Boulevard South in 1981, Rick's historical knowledge was a key asset. He provided customers with rich historical context about the items they brought in, which added value and intrigue to the store's inventory. But Rick didn't rely solely on the shop to make ends meet. At night, he repossessed cars, a job that was dangerous and demanding, but necessary to support his young family. 5. Years after the store opened, the family relocated the business to a larger location on Fremont Street. However, after just 2 years, they lost their lease and were forced to move again. In his autobiography, Rick explained that he and his dad had long dreamed of turning the shop into a full-fledged pawn shop. They believed it was the logical next step for their business. Unfortunately, a law from 1955 in Las Vegas limited the number of pawn licenses that could be issued, tying them to the city's population size. The Harrisons had to wait until Las Vegas's population hit 250,000 stores before they could even apply. Finally, in 1989, after facing numerous legal hurdles and setbacks, Rick and his father received their long-awaited pawn license. That same year, they opened the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop at 713 Las Vegas Boulevard South, not far from the iconic Las Vegas Strip. Initially, the father-son duo focused on selling sports memorabilia and unique historical items, but as time went on, jewelry became their top-selling product. The shop flourished and gained a reputation in Las Vegas. By 2005, the shop was lending out millions of dollars annually and earning hundreds of thousands in interest income. The following year, the shop became known for its rare sports items, with intriguing backstories, including a 2001 Super Bowl ring that had once belonged to football player Brock Williams. The shop also became a lifeline for gamblers who would pawn personal belongings in order to get gas money to drive home. This unique combination of personal stories, history, and commerce eventually caught the attention of the History Channel. And the rest is, well, history. In July 2009, the show Pawn Stars premiered. Brent Montgomery and Colby Gaines from left field. Pictures came up with the idea after visiting Las Vegas in 2008. They were intrigued by the quirky and mysterious world of pawn shops and believed these places were filled with untapped stories and characters. They searched for a family-owned shop to feature and eventually found the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop. This wasn't the first time the shop had been on camera. It had been featured in a PBS documentary in 2001, and Rick had appeared in an episode of Insomniac with Dave Attell in 2003. The show was first pitched to HBO, which passed on the original concept. However, after adjustments were made to make it more family-friendly, the show found a home on the History Channel. Originally titled Pawning History, the show was renamed Pawn Stars, a clever play on porn stars. The show was filmed entirely at the Las Vegas pawn shop. During filming, the store was closed to the public, and only select customers were allowed in. While jewelry remained the most common item brought in, people also brought in a variety of vintage and antique items, creating endless opportunities for entertainment and education. The Harisson family quickly became household names. Viewers loved their personalities, the fascinating items, and the blend of humor and history. By January 2011, Pawn Stars was the top-rated show on the History Channel and the second highest-rated reality TV show behind Jersey Shore. That same year, on June 7, 2011, Rick Harisson released his biography titled License to Pawn, Deals, Steals, and My Life at the Gold and Silver. The book reached number 22 on the New York Times bestseller list by June 26, 2011. In 2011, Rick also divorced his second wife, Tracy. A year later, he announced his engagement to Deanna Burdett, who was also divorced. Despite having been through 2 marriages, Rick was optimistic about the future. He continued to ride the wave of the show's success and growing popularity. Rick, Corey, and Chumley even appeared as themselves in an episode of iCarly titled, I Lost My Mind in Vegas. Just 4 days later, Rick played an antique store owner in an episode of The Middle. Around this time, Rick married Deanna in Laguna Beach, California. And through this marriage, he gained 3 stepdaughters, Serena, Kiona, and Marissa. In January 2014, Rick Harisson became the spokesperson for the Micro Touch One razor, a men's shaving product, and appeared in a TV commercial for it. Later that year, the History Channel premiered United Stuff of America, a show produced by the same team behind Pawn Stars, which focused on notable artifacts from American history. In July 2014, another show titled Pawnography premiered, featuring Rick, Corey, and Chumley competing against contestants to stop them from winning cash and items from the pawn shop's inventory. But life wasn't all glitz and glamour. In June 2018, Rick experienced one of the hardest losses of his life. His father, Richard the Old Man Harisson, passed away. Rick announced his father's death to over 245,000 Instagram followers, sharing that Parkinson's disease was the cause. The Harisson family's representative confirmed the loss and released a statement similar to the one Rick posted. The History Channel also expressed its sadness, honoring Richard Harisson as a beloved member of their family. "We are very sad about the loss of our friend Richard the Old Man Harisson," they stated. "We'll miss his wisdom and honesty. Our hearts are with the Harisson family during this tough time." Losing his father was a profound emotional blow for Rick and marked the beginning of a difficult period. It made Rick solely responsible for running the shop and looking after the family. Then the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2019, which brought new and unforeseen challenges. With the world shutting down, tourism dried up, and foot traffic at the shop dropped dramatically. Many assumed that pawn shops would thrive during the pandemic, since people were in need of fast cash, but that wasn't the case. While there was an initial surge in business at the start of the pandemic, it didn't last long. While there was initially a boost in business at the start of the pandemic, it didn't last long. As lockdowns became more widespread and tourism ground to a halt, pawn shops in major destinations like Las Vegas took a serious hit. Rick Harrison's Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, known not only for its long history, but also as the backdrop of one of the most successful reality shows in TV history, was not immune to the financial pressure. Rick faced the harsh reality of having to cut back on staff, shorten store hours, and even temporarily close doors in the worst moments of the crisis. What was once a buzzing hub of both tourists and locals became a quiet, almost ghostly shell of its former self. Harisson spoke openly in interviews about how difficult the time had been for small business owners like himself, and how the pandemic had tested not only his financial strength, but also his emotional resilience. The loss of foot traffic due to travel restrictions meant fewer walk-in customers, which dramatically affected the shop's earnings. Meanwhile, ongoing expenses such as maintenance, security, and payroll for essential staff didn't go away. The store had to get creative by leaning into its online presence, offering more inventory on digital platforms, and leveraging the Pawn Stars brand to maintain engagement. But still, for someone like Rick Harisson, who thrived on personal interaction and enjoyed the real-time haggling and unique stories each customer brought, it was a significant and frustrating adjustment. The intimate, people-driven experience that defined the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop was hard to replicate virtually. Around this same time, Rick began facing a new set of challenges, not just financial or pandemic-related, but deeply personal ones, that tested the very fabric of his relationships and his mental strength. Following the death of his father, Rick was left with not only a leadership role in the business, but also in the family. He had to juggle being a public figure while also being the glue that held the family together during one of its most fragile periods. This kind of pressure, which often stays hidden behind the scenes, took its toll. Rick found himself stretched, thin managing operations, filming obligations, and emotional duties as a son, father, and now patriarch. His stepchildren, Corey, Adam, and his 3 stepdaughters, Serena, Kiana, and Marissa, all looked up to him for guidance, while fans around the world continued to tune in and expect the same light-hearted energy he always brought to the screen. Even as the pandemic began to ease in 2021 and foot traffic slowly returned to the Las Vegas Strip, the effects lingered. Many staff members who had been furloughed chose not to return. The dynamics inside the shop had changed, and the weight of maintaining both the store's reputation and its operations rested heavier than ever on Rick's shoulders. Fans noticed that the energy in the newer episodes of Pawn Stars was different, less playful, more subdued, and perhaps more reflective. Rick, now in his mid-50s, carried a quiet gravity in his demeanor. He smiled less, negotiated harder, and often appeared preoccupied. Some speculated online that he might be ready to retire or that the shop itself might be sold off. But Rick dispelled those rumors with calm clarity. "This shop is my life," he said in an interview, "and as long as I can walk, I'll be here." Still, it wasn't just emotional and financial strain weighing on him. Legal battles began to surface as well, with the visibility that came from being on TV for over a decade. Rick had also attracted his fair share of lawsuits and legal controversies. Disputes over ownership percentages, intellectual property rights, and behind-the-scenes financial disagreements began to rear their heads. While Rick tried to keep most of these issues private, a few became public knowledge through leaked court documents and gossip columns. One particularly jarring moment was when a former employee filed a lawsuit alleging that they had been promised a stake in the business based on their early contributions to the show's development and success, an allegation that Rick and his legal team firmly denied. As if that weren't enough, family tensions also began to bubble up in ways that even Rick couldn't completely keep out of the public eye. Corey Harisson, Rick's son and longtime business partner on the show, began expressing frustrations of his own. While Corey had always respected his father, their relationship became more complicated over the years. Corey wanted more autonomy in decision-making and reportedly pushed for a more modern approach to inventory, management, marketing, and digital presence, areas where Rick was more traditional. Though their disagreements were never fully aired on television, insiders noted that the two clashed behind the scenes and that some of their on-screen banter had begun to carry an undercurrent of real tension. Still, Rick continued to emphasize that no matter what happened, family came first. "We don't always agree, but we always have each other's backs," he said during a live-streamed Q&A with fans. The evolution of the gold and silver pawn shop itself reflected Rick's internal transformation. What had started as a humble 300-square-foot coin store was now a globally recognized landmark. Tourists came from around the world, not just to browse inventory, but to meet the stars of the show. Merchandise bearing Rick's likeness, from bobbleheads to branded shirts, lined the shelves. There were tours, private signings, even charity events hosted by the shop. But Rick never let the glamour distract him from the core purpose of the business, helping everyday people in tight spots. He often emphasized that pawn shops weren't just about oddities and collectibles. They were also about trust, survival, and second chances. People came to him in their worst moments, jobless, stranded, in debt, and Rick took pride in offering them options when others wouldn't. As the years rolled on and Rick settled into the role of Las Vegas icon, he also became more politically vocal, speaking out on economic policies and small business legislation that he felt directly impacted his livelihood. He gave interviews expressing concern about taxes, inflation, and overregulation, positioning himself as not just a reality TV star, but as a spokesman for American entrepreneurs. These political stances gained him both praise and criticism, but Rick remained unbothered. He believed in speaking his truth, regardless of backlash. "I've worked too hard and come too far to pretend I don't have opinions," he said in one televised debate. Meanwhile, his personal life continued to evolve. His marriage to Deanna Burdett, while happy for a time, eventually ended in divorce as well. The couple cited irreconcilable differences, and Rick once again found himself alone, reflecting on the complexities of balancing fame, family, and love. Friends close to Rick noted that He became more introspective during this period, often retreating into books and long walks through the Nevada desert to find clarity. Though he was surrounded by fans, employees, and cameras, Rick often felt the solitude of someone who had built an empire but still carried the weight of grief and responsibility. Despite all these setbacks, Rick never gave up on the show or the shop. He continued showing up each day, cracking dry jokes, assessing historical artifacts with sharp precision, and reminding viewers why they fell in love with the show in the first place. Pawn Stars kept evolving too, introducing spin-offs and road trip editions where the cast explored historical items across America. These adaptations brought fresh